Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's first ChatSRHR session, where we'll be talking about how to become a pleasure implementer. And we're so thrilled to be joined by three, soon to be four, amazing pleasure activists who will be talking about their journeys and their work to becoming a pleasure implementer. So without further ado, I will hand it over to our wonderful panel to introduce themselves and talk about their work.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Sarian Kamara. I'm the founder and director of Keep the Drums, Lose the Knife. We're women's rights movements based in Sierra Leone in the UK, working on violence against women issues. But our main focus is on FGM because I survived FGM at age 11. So I'm going to stop there. Oh, you have one.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Innocent Grant. I work with Young and Alive Initiative based in Tanzania. Our work is focused on promoting adolescents and young people's sexual and reproductive health and rights. I'm looking forward to this session. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anastase Ndagijimana. I work for Haguruka. Haguruka is a Rwandan national government organization that defends and promotes the rights of women and children. I work specifically on the projects related to SRHR, sexual and reproductive health and rights. Recently, we have been implementing comprehensive sexuality education in faith-based school settings. I look forward to this amazing conversation. Thank you.
Someone want to start a little bit, talk about their journey to becoming pleasure, what that looks like for you. Whoever would like to start.
Mike's in your hands.
Yeah, I can go first, no problem. Becoming pressure implementer has not been an easy work. It's really challenging. I remember at the time we started reaching out to schools where we wanted to pilot the project. We faced backlash, a lot of challenges. Head teachers were denying the project to be, implemented in their schools because of different traditional and religious beliefs. And again, the setting in which we were really working was so challenging. Conservative mindsets, people who are still relying on religious beliefs and traditional norms. It was not easy. But after then, we were able to engage them in open discussions, telling them why pressure is very important, particularly for young people who sometimes have practiced some sexual activities. And we wanted them to understand how important it is for them to have accurate information to be able to decide to make right choice regarding their sexuality. So it was really challenging journey, but thank God we were able to make it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I should go the second now. Yeah, so I think in Tanzania, we have also been implementing pleasure-based sexual health interventions. But I'll be honest, for so many years, when we joined sexual health work, it's not positive because that's how we've been taught as well. If you agree with me, the way we've been given sexual health information when we were growing up, it was not the full package. Most of the time was just fear-based approach. You're being shown pictures of people suffering gonorrhea or syphilis, and then that's it. And then all they say is that sex is bad, sex is not good. When you do this, you're gonna end up in this. But it's like when you're being given a jar of honey and you're being told it's sour, and then the moment you taste it, it's good. So that's it. So it's very different. Now coming back to how Young and Alive started implementing pleasure-based sexual health. So Young and Alive does a lot of SBCC work, social and behavioral change communication, challenging perceptions and norms that are hindering access to sexual and reproductive health information and services for young people. But also we understand that we won't remain young forever. And so it's important that we start building the new generation of leaders who come and talk of our work when we are aging out, because it's very important that we have youth-led movements, youth-led sexual health accountability mechanisms. So we worked with Amplify Change in implementing a project called Young and Alive Fellowship, that we opened a call for applications for young people to apply being part of the fellowship. And then we built capacity to young people on 3 leadership sexual reproductive health and rights leadership tracks, which are service delivery, social entrepreneurship, and advocacy. But the moment you engage with young people for quite like a long time, then you start understanding that they love talking about sex in a very positive way. And when they talk in a very positive way, it becomes fun and everyone seems to engage in the discussion. And it gives you an opportunity to understand issues possibly you'll never understand when you do not engage with young people themselves. And when it's not a very positive and open discussions about sex and pleasure. So we decided to integrate pleasure-based sexual health dialogues when we are doing discussions with young people during the Young Life Fellowship in Tanzania. I remember during the very first dialogue, we kind of separate because it was very hard. How are we going to do it? How are we going to make it very positive? But we just started by sharing our own stories of our first sexual experience, what was fun, what was not good, and that's it. So we separated. We had positive themes that were coming from the pleasure dialogues, and there were negative themes that were coming from the pleasure dialogues. And it was not now about gonorrhea and syphilis and pregnancy. No, no, no. It was about position, smell, the smile, the communication, the consent, self-care, and all those kinds of themes were coming up during the fellowship when young people were sharing about their stories regarding their sex and relationship, and we just came to learn. So when we're implementing the pleasure-based sexual health intervention, it opens up the way for young people, as I mentioned.
Good sex and pleasure mentor. And it provides an opportunity, as I said, for discussing about contraception as well, because we are doing it for pleasure, not doing it for babies. It provides an opportunity for them to discuss about which pleasure points of my body, when you touch me, that I will feel happy. When you don't touch me, I won't feel happy. And it also helps to break the so-called like gender stereotypes between boys and men, between boys and girls, between men and women, who normally asks for sex and why. So it helps to break those kind of power dynamics when it comes to sex and relationship among girls and boys, among boys and boys, among girls and girls, and it's very promising. Now, despite these promising stuffs that are coming out of pleasure-based sexual health intervention, there are also challenges and a lot of pushbacks that are coming. But again, we had to push back the pushback that is coming in order to, so the aim was just, because I remember the first time, I'm trying to remember the very first time when we introduced that we are going to do pleasure-based sexual health intervention. One of the government leaders in the room when they say, no, this is coming from homosexuality, this is coming from young people, this is coming from this, this is coming from this. And then one thing that was very powerful that I love sharing about it was, it wasn't us who responded to that argument, but it was a young person within the room who responded saying, no, that's not true. Our bodies, at a certain age, our bodies starts to demand doing sex. So when you have the full package of information, it helps us to be informed and make informed decisions, which are right decisions, rather than hiding it. And for many times we've been implementing, but for many years we've been implementing negative sexual health intervention, but what is the outcome in Tanzania? We still have high risk of teenage pregnancies, high risk of STIs, and other negative outcomes of not implementing a very positive of sexual health intervention. So that came from a young person itself and helped to change the narrative of the room. And that we had an approval to continue doing the community dialogues on pleasure-based sexual health intervention. And I remember last year in the ICFP we shined to keep talking about pleasure. We had people from the Ministry of Health, when they see Young and Alive now, they'll be like, oh, pleasure people, pleasure people. So we got that label and we love it because we know it's working. Maybe I'll end there and then wait for questions. Thank you.
Wow. We want to hear it for them. Let's hear it for them. This is amazing. That really set my mind, for what, I've been thinking about how do I want to approach this, because there's a specific way they want us to talk about our experiences and our journey. Right, for those of you that just joined me, my name is Sarian Kamara. I'm from Keep the Drums Listen. I'm the director and founder of this organization, and I am addressing you guys today from a point of a survivor of FGM. and how I come about, being a pleasure and answer. You understand? As someone who have been through female genital mutilation, when you talk about pleasure, most of you that understand the reason why women and girls are caught, is to reduce the urge of sex, for you not to have that urge of wanting to have sex at a young age. And what is common across all the cutting communities is to prevent shame from happening to your family, to stop you from bringing shame, not getting pregnant, as the young man rightfully said, because you cannot get pregnant out of wedlock. So they will discourage you every opportunity your family have to discourage you from sex, they will do it. So as Africans, they come together to find a way to control this urge, by cutting women and girls. So I was cut at the age of 11. So what that means for me as a woman, whose body is yearning for sex, whose body is telling you something else, but in your mind you were taught to understand your body in a different way. Fast forward, I got pregnant, I got pregnant at the age of 18. Because even though I was caught, my body is telling me something else. But although my body is telling me something else, when my first experience of sex was very, very painful because of the way I was cut. My vagina ended up with thick scar tissue that doesn't stretch. We're talking about pleasure, guys. When you have thick scar tissue that doesn't stretch, and you're a young woman whose body is yearning for sex, and you want to have sex, but you don't know how to arouse this pleasure, how to prepare your body for you to have comfortable and pleasurable sex, it means pain. Because, scar tissue doesn't stretch. And if your vagina is wet, it can be very painful when you have penetration. So even though your mind is telling you, I want to have sex, but you're there, all you're going through is pain. Because even your partner at that age do not understand. And the community settings where we're from, we don't have this privilege, to talk. As this young star sitting next to me, I'm smiling because I love the fact that at your age, you're able to have this conversation. You're able to create that space, because you cannot get pregnant out of wedlock. So they will discourage you every opportunity your family have to discourage you from sex, they will do it. So as Africans, they come together to find a way to control this urge, by cutting women and girls. So I was cut at the age of 11. So what that means for me as a woman, whose body is yearning for sex, whose body is telling you something else, but in your mind you were taught to understand your body in a different way. Fast forward, I got pregnant, I got pregnant at the age of 18. Because even though I was caught, my body is telling me something else. But although my body is telling me something else, when my first experience of sex was very, very painful because of the way I was cut. My vagina ended up with thick scar tissue that doesn't stretch. We're talking about pleasure, guys. When you have thick scar tissue that doesn't stretch, and you're a young woman whose body is yearning for sex, and you want to have sex, but you don't know how to arouse this pleasure, how to prepare your body for you to have comfortable and pleasurable sex, it means pain. Because, scar tissue doesn't stretch. And if your vagina is wet, it can be very painful. Because even your partner at that age do not understand. And the community settings where we're from, we don't have this privilege, to talk. As this young star sitting next to me, I'm smiling because I love the fact that at your age, you're able to have this conversation. You're able to create that space, for young people to be able to benefit and to understand that you need to know your body, you need to be ready, you need to want to, So that's just that. So for me, that's where I'm coming from.
And how do I break this barrier? I have been sexually active since I was 18. My first orgasm come when I was 22. And it did not happen in Africa. It happened in the United Kingdom. You know what that means. You know what that means. Because there's access to information, you know. There you have the right to explore your body without nobody asking you or looking at you in a way, you can take chances. You understand? Yeah. So that was it for me. So at 22, I had my first experience of orgasm. My God, I was in a different place. And because of that, I want every other woman, African woman, to come to that place where I was. It wasn't almost immediately. It took time because, as Africans, when we move our cultural boundaries with us. You understand? We can't talk openly about sex. You can't even talk about FGM. You can't talk about your body part in certain way. In fact, if you dress certain way, they look at you and they class you in certain, within certain categories. So I am from Peckham, by the way. For those of you that know London, if you know Peckham, you know that is our Africa in London. So, like, you have to really mind what you say around people and mind your words and your approach to things. Anyway, fast forwarding, I get to know how FGM affects me when I went to give birth to my daughter in 2000. I need to think because I have too many children. Yes, I have six children, by the way. I'm not joking. So when I think of my children's date of birth, I have to think. Yeah. She was born in 2003. Is it? Am I right? Yes. So she'll be 2003 to now. Fantastic, I'm right. Yes. So she's 20 in March. In 2003, I spent 4 days in labor giving birth because of this same scar tissue I'm talking about. My vagina would not stretch. As you know, what is cut is what will stretch for the baby to come out. And mine was badly chopped off. You understand? So my vagina would not stretch. So I was in labor for 4 days. But anyway, a Jamaican woman was the one who came to examine me as they were ready, preparing me to go for a cesarean session. She said, "You don't need that." She said, "It's because of your scar tissue. That's why your vagina would not stretch." She said, "I will cut you near your anus and I will give way for the baby to come out." And when she did that, half an hour later, I had the baby. So that was when I realized the connection between what I was going through, the pain during sex, and everything. So I get to understand that this part of my body was traumatized and this is how it affected me. But I didn't stop because now I know what was happening with me and I need to find a solution. I was a young woman who wants to explore because remember, I've already had pleasure having sex. I'm not going to stop I'm not going to allow my FGM stop me from exploring more pleasure. So I decided to talk to my women in my community, wanting to know if they feel the same way I do about FGM. So I kind of break the silence. Fast forward, I was dive deep into the campaign of FGM, sharing my stories to anybody that cares to listen. And then we create this space, a safe space for survivors like ourselves. But within this space, we sometimes invite women who have not been caught. Because why? By talking about our experiences, we get to realize that not only women who have been through FGM are having pleasure issue. Some women who have not been through FGM also have this issue because sex is in the mind. So when we find that, we create this space, so a safe space. And sometimes we invite our partner. My husband is very open. My husband will sit here and talk about sex with me and anybody, anywhere. We are that open because let me tell you one thing, FGM don't only affect women, it does affect men too. you know, because if you know the amount of time my husband would touch me when I know he need to play, and then I would just do like this because I'm not in the mood. My body is not ready. My mind is not there. I have a lot of things in my mind. You know, sometimes for women like us who have been through FGM, the way it's affecting us, your body will shut down to the point that nothing works. Nothing. You know, there's sometimes we just feel sorry for our partners because we don't want them looking outside for sex. So you just lie in there and you take it in. And you know what that means for us. Women, just imagine your vagina with thick scar tissue and you having penetration and there's nothing coming out. There's no pleasure. It's dry. It's very painful. So for me, I wanted to help other women who are going through these same issues because when we have this discussion, that is one thing that always come up in this safe space, that I have never have any pleasure in sex. And you find women in their 40s, in their 50s, telling you that. Just before I walk up this stage now, there's a lady who campaigns with me. She's from Sierra Leone. She's older than me. I'm 45. She's older than me. She said, Sarian, what's the topic? I said, we're going to talk about pleasure. She said, do you have pleasure after being caught? And this is someone that have children, she's married. So you see the need for we to have this conversation with our young people, but not forgetting women of our age and even older women. There's nothing wrong if you find pleasure in your 60s, in your 50s, you know, but at least you get to know what is pleasure. I'm going to stop there because I know a young lady just joined us. I can talk for London, so I'm going to pass up the mic. Thank you. Okay.
Wow, it's so wonderful to hear the pleasure people speak because you just relate and resonate so much with this. And even though I'm based in India, everything that I heard you two say, and I wish I hadn't missed the first 10 minutes, just hits so close to why I do what I do as well. I'm really delighted to be at Women Deliver representing the Pleasure Project. Which is an organization that advocates for the inclusion of pleasure in public health and education globally. And I was really lucky to be a Pleasure Fellow and receive funding to organize a little project, as well as training and mentorship from the Pleasure Project. And so I just want to provide a little context about the work I do and my country, since I'm based in India. We're still at a point where marital rape is legal. Homosexuality was only decriminalized in 2018. Gay marriage is still illegal. Only 5% of Indian men use condoms. I mean, clearly the people tasked with supposedly caring about our rights or education are not doing enough. And so I actually create a sex education, pleasure-based sex education videos on the internet, on social media, that are free and easy to access. And I'm not a public health professional. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a woman who wanted pleasure, who had to learn and teach and self-navigate the systems around sexual and reproductive health and rights, and was so frustrated because clearly the stakeholders tasked with providing this stuff are doing a dismal job. Why are 2.5 million people coming to me, a stranger on the internet, for their sex ed? Because clearly the doctors and teachers and parents and family planning people and disease prevention people and I don't even know, whoever else is supposed to be doing this work is not doing it, right? And then I think we share that frustration where so many young people who want information and access and safety have none, and even in their own homes have none. And in fact, unfortunately, even in one's home, the shame, the fear, often even the danger and violence is perpetuated. So even the place that's supposed to be safe for you isn't so often, and that's the reason I think so many young people turn to strangers on the internet or in their support groups or whatever it is for that support, because sometimes even those closest to them are actually the most dangerous in communities like ours. And so I wanted to just ask two questions. I mean, I think anyone working in public health and development should think about these things. Where are young people really learning about sex, and why does pleasure matter? And I think, I mean, we've heard so much about why pleasure matters, so perhaps some of what I say is just echoing that. But I think globally, I feel like no matter where you are, and whether it's the West or the developing world or whatever it is, I feel actually pleasure is highly underrepresented in communications. I mean, look at the the way rights that were fought for 50 years ago are being revoked in the US, like this, the self-proclaimed center of the free world. What is going on, right? So I think this narrative that like the West has it better and our parts of the world doesn't, it's not such a linear and easy to say narrative, actually, and there's some pockets of incredibly pleasure positive people even in our parts of the world. I think there's this lens that puts like India and Africa as, at the bottom of the of where things are, and then the US or something at the top. But it's not really like that, right? And what is progress? Sometimes some people are more likely to believe in equality and pleasure for all, but there's more that other people are doubling down on their desire to restrict those rights, right? We're seeing anti-rights movements even in the West. So anyway, sorry, I digress. I think that at least in India, the internet is where young people learn about sex. I think actually anywhere where there's internet, that is where young people are learning about sex. And so anyone working in sex education and public health should use the internet because you can reach so many people that way. And that's where they're going anyway. And what's much easier to find on the internet is porn. And it's not feminist, ethical porn that's easy to find. It's like the mainstream, misogynistic, often violent porn, which, and I'm not anti-porn, but I just think that it's not always the most helpful reference point for a very young person, and it ends up being the first visual reference point for sex for over 50% of like people as young as 10 years old, because it's so central to the architecture of the internet and it's super easy to find. And so I think that learning about sex from porn is like learning about driving by watching The Fast and the Furious. It was not intended as education; it's entertainment, right? And so I think anyone doing sex education should make their resources as easy to find as porn currently is, so that there's a healthier and more wholesome vision also easily available, right? And I think the Pleasure Project is so sort of masterfully trying to bridge that gap. I admire and learn so much from them between the people trying to work for safe, consensual, rights-based approaches to CSE, etc., and the adult entertainment industry that like never has condoms or doesn't really look into consent, or how can we make the public health communication sexier and the erotic communication safer, because people are not paying it. Honestly, who is watching like the UN's videos about HIV prevention? Only each other, only the other people in the development world. Do you see 12-year-olds watching that? They're not going to watch that. So if you want to be dull and uninteresting and focus only on HIV, disease prevention and accidental pregnancy prevention, no young people want to watch what you're putting out. You have to talk about pleasure because that's the fundamental motivation for most people, especially young people, having sex. And to refuse to acknowledge and celebrate that motivation, to almost perpetuate the shame by having silence around it, is making your communications extremely unappealing to them. And on the other hand, what's much easier to find and more appealing is often overlooking aspects like safety and consent and this stuff. So we can't think of these sources of information in silos. We have to kind of learn from each other and try and together create a wholesome and healthy vision for sex. And I think just simply putting it, like, what do you think a young person would be more likely to click on? How do condoms prevent sexually transmitted infections, or like 5 ways to use condoms to spice up your sex life? That's what you were saying as well, right? So that's something I try and do by creating scientifically accurate, judgment free, short and fun videos, answering common questions, providing information about everything from anatomy. Like most you was what you said about never having an orgasm for so many adult women, that's the most common message I receive from women as well. I'm 50 years old, I have 2 kids, I've never had an orgasm. I learned about the clitoris from your video, and I'm like 47 today. I didn't know I don't urinate from the same opening I menstruate from, because we never get any formal information about our bodies, let alone our external genitals, in relation to pleasure, right? Most people have never even taken a look at their vulva properly. You have to sit there with a hand mirror, and you're never encouraged to do that. So I find that the people tasked to do this work aren't doing it properly in our countries, that people are turning to each other for peer-to-peer education. And I think there's a huge opportunity with the internet for anyone interested in doing CSE. And I think it's important to co-create it with young people and not gatekeep. This is not only the realm of the doctors and the PhDs. It is that young people should sort of galvanize their own peer groups to learn about this stuff. I don't believe you need to be a doctor to know about your body, or to know about pleasure, or to know about contraception. This should be general knowledge, and so much can be self-managed. This thing about go see a doctor, go see a doctor. What if you live in a community where there is no doctor? What if you live in a community where the doctor actually harms you because they know your parents, and then they go and tell your parents that you are a teenager with a pregnancy, or you are an unmarried woman looking for contraception? That's the type of stuff that happens in my country. Or you're denied services because of your caste or religion, because unfortunately doctors are as much vulnerable to the biases of the society that we're all living in. That there's unfortunately religion enters the practice, caste-based discrimination enters the practice, and that's not okay, right? So I really think we need to acknowledge that pleasure matters, acknowledge that young people are learning about pleasure from sources other than those tasked to provide it, and do a better job. And lastly, I just want to say that I think there could be no more profound indicator of gender equality than pleasure. And I don't mean only in the bedroom, although I do believe in a country where all women could say they have orgasms as frequently as the men do, I would bet that that would be a very gender equal country. I don't think we have a single country where where we would score anywhere near equally yet. But like as an extension of that, I think pleasure in all aspects of life indicate that you have agency and autonomy and safety and dignity and perhaps economic freedom and you can sort of agency in your relationships. How do you experience pleasure in any aspect of life if you don't have those things? So I think what more profound indicator of gender equality could there be? And as women, I think we're sort of systematically denied pleasure. You're made to feel guilty eating, sleeping. We feel guilty sleeping. I feel guilty sleeping. You're supposed to be caregiving, not sleeping, right? Or working, not sleeping. And let alone having orgasms. I mean, we're not supposed to laugh or wear what we want. So I really think like reframing pleasure as a very serious and powerful indicator of gender equality, not a shameful, frivolous, funny thing, which unfortunately I feel even today in the development world, like nobody sits and says, I like sex. You would be sort of like blushing or something, even if you're working in HIV prevention, to say, I like sex, And so I think we need to just think about that and do better.
So I think that I'm sure everyone has probably heard the statement that, well, there's bigger things to think about than pleasure, in these contexts. Like, what type of tools and responses and messaging do you come up with to try and insert pleasure into your work, responding to the context in particular that you're working in? I don't know, maybe Anastase, if you'd like to start, because you have a particularly challenging context that you've been
Yeah,
working
thank you
in.
so much. For us, it is, let's say we are seated here calling ourselves a congregation and I'm pastor preaching. Do you think I'm going to mention about sex? No, in Rwanda, that won't happen. So it's really challenging. That happened to us when we were trying to get into schools, and you call teachers to come together, ask them what they think about pleasurable sex. For them, they don't even open up to talk to you. They feel like this is not our belief. We won't talk about this. And the questions will be coming across saying, how do you think is this going to work? And since we are not even open up to talk to young people. But for young people, it was more excitement. They were like, we now get saviors. So because they have been really, really not having opportunities to talk about sex, pleasurable activities openly, because in the schools they have structures where it doesn't not allow them to openly discuss anything that comes along with sex. And in faith-based school settings, they have these strict regulations and measures to control students, whatever they engage in, either in the curriculum or extracurricular activities. And I remember what we did was more focusing on how we can create safe space for these young people whom we were working with, so that they can open up to talk, freely discuss their myth fears, and break down some stereotypes around sexuality. So I remember the time we went to school, we were having discussion with the club, and some of the students stood up, say, I'm really scared to ask this question, but I want to ask for my own risk. How about if I just go in the school and talk to my teacher that I want to have sex with my, say, partner. He might be having a girlfriend or boyfriend. And to me, I was like perceiving that as a free space that the child has gotten, and he has an opportunity to maybe get to know what is really behind the information he wants to know about sexual activity or any sexual reproductive health rights information. I remember Innocent talked about how they have been perceiving them like pressure people are coming. That's applied to us the same because when we went to the school, children were very excited and they could even skip their classes, especially those who were in the club, to come discuss with us because they really had this open space to tell us whatever they feel like. They have information which teachers are not ready to sort. They are observing information on internet and everywhere in their colleagues and peers, and this when it is combined, it's either wrong or right. Trust me, these young people have information, enough information, even more than what we have, but most of them are wrong. So we wanted for us, Haguruka wanted really to sort this information, get young people to know what is right, what is wrong. And for teachers, we wanted to really be supportive. When a child approaches them asking questions, they have to be supportive and cooperative. Some teachers be like, don't ask me anything regarding to sex because that's not part of what I'm supposed to teach as a teacher. And you remember in faith school setting, it's not easy talking to a head teacher saying, I'm here to talk about sex. I want to know how children are really familiar with sexual activity. We have been not seeing a lot going on with teenage pregnancy, and maybe that is the result of lack of accurate information about how they make responsible choices about their sexuality. So for us, we really wanted to make sure that these young people have enough information that can guide them through as they make responsible choices. And again, this sparkled a conversation on consent, something very important. And where we noticed that some young people have been getting involved in sexual activities, but like forcibly, because I have a boyfriend, and if he asks me about having sex with him, I don't have to deny because he has power over me. So for that, we wanted to get young girls understand that it's for their rights to say no when someone asks for sex. I remember there is a question that has been trending because we have been receiving calls from toll free line of young girls saying, I had sex last night, but I'm not really sure if I didn't get pregnant. That was because she was forced to have sex and she didn't consent for it. And the responses could be first to get them understand that it's their body, which reflects to the bodily autonomy that this pressure approach has really made available in the schools we were working with. And when we look into traditional setting, traditionally there are some discussions that are meant for young people. Still, it's a challenge that we want really to tap into and see if we can address it. And there are some discussions that are meant for adults. It's like parents are teaching their children not to be old. There are some information you don't have to know, and yet children are getting them from online, from their colleagues, from their peers. And the questions were coming: how do I really get to know whether I'm sexually active or I'm not? How do I consent for my boyfriend? How do I get into sex that enough so that I feel it, I enjoy it? And this is was more of frequently repeated question asked from young people. I remember a teacher, one of the teacher refused to even openly say about anything concerning sex because she was thinking this is not part of my religious belief, and if I openly say about this, then maybe my church fellow ends up knowing that I openly talk about this, they're going to expel me out of the church. That was a challenge which even still exists in some communities. We were able to actually work with the schools, but still in the homes. It was not easy because we give them information to children. They go back home. Whenever they start a conversation with parents, parents be like, so you're now coming? We don't know where you have been. The information you have is wrong. That's devil. You shouldn't be talking about that in here. So that was a really challenging situation. But again, whenever, let's say, if we had an opportunity of talking to some parents, because there is a time we used to be engaging with school leaders through PTA, parent teachers committees, and it was where parents could come together with teachers, ask their concerns about the challenges children and students are facing in the school. Uh, Parents gets to know what is happening. I remember one was briefed about the sexual pleasure activity happening in the clubs, and she was like, no, I had my child talking about pleasure and something like that, but I was really confused. And I felt like I should come here, ask what's going on. Are you starting to bring these? They actually considered as like they are introducing something bad to their children. Some were like, if you talk openly about the sex, this is introducing our children to being sexually active and start engaging themselves in sexual activities. But that did end there because even the pleasure was being that has been discussed either through the radio talk shows we've been having. Some young people could easily open questions because they know I'm asking this and I'm not with my parent. I want to get a real and deep information about it. So if I can conclusively say that pressure has really been one of the major drivers to making change around sexuality and contributing to bodily autonomy among young people. And again, that's not viewed in an angle of supporting young people because it has also noticed that we can apply this in a couple. There are some evidences where we tried this and it has been really working because it's not about me, it's about us. You do me, I do you. Some people have been saying, if you come to me and you want me to have sex with you, I don't feel it. You should first ask me. Try a way that you get me in a conversation, get me understand why it's necessary for me, why it's not really risky, or if you're telling me I'm having this with you, how do we do it in a safer way? So that was really what really for us happened. And I remember the most of the questions that came was wanting to know more information about the sex life, either having engaged in sexual activity or having practiced that, but they still have fear to talk about it and to get more information they might be having. Thank you.
Yeah, I think from my side, I've learned a lot. So started engaging in sexual and reproductive health work since 2014 when I was in a college, and then I thought I knew a lot of stuff, but no. um, until this time, when I think there is a big power when we share our authentic stories of ourselves. So when we share our stories, it helps to build trust. And when we build trust, it helps in creating a safe space where young people can be also open to share about their own experiences. And it gives us an opportunity to respond to those experiences, to respond to their concerns. I think that's what I've learned when implementing pleasure-based sexual health interventions. It always starts with us sharing our own stories and our own experiences, authentic stories, not twisted stories, real stories. And then when we do that, as I mentioned, it helps in creating trust, saying, "Oh, this is a safe person, this is a good person to share my own story as well." And then when they share their stories, we respond to their concerns, because there are so many stuff that they're quite unsure if they are right or wrong. And then when they share their stories, it gives us an opportunity to know those issues and be able to respond to that. And I think that's a big task we have going forward. How do we keep creating safer spaces for young sexually active people to share their stories, but also to share their concerns, so that we can be in a position to respond to those stories. Yeah, I think that's a big task. One thing that we're already doing now is through our contraceptive. It's called the Contraceptive Conversation Facebook page, but that's where we provided just an opportunity for young people to ask questions, and then we respond to their specific questions. So we don't go saying this is how you do this is how you do that, but ask me any question regarding sexual health. Ask me any question regarding pleasure, and we'll be able to respond to that. And then so it's a Q&A sexual health model, that they ask questions, then we respond to those questions. But again, it came with trust. Why do they trust us to ask even questions that they are quite uncomfortable asking? It's because we were able to share authentic stories. I think maybe it's through our platform, through our own also individual Instagram accounts or Facebook accounts, that young people can ask questions that are a taboo talking about in Tanzania. I receive a lot of questions regarding sexuality. How do I know that I'm a gay? I'm bisexual. I'm this way. But it's because I was able to share my authentic story, and it's because I was able to create that safe space for them to share. So I think that's the challenge that we have going forward, us as practitioners, donors, religious leaders we involve with, traditional leaders we involve with, starting talking what's real and what's true regarding our own experiences, and that helps in creating safer environment for responding to issues that we think we know them, but we actually don't know them. They know a lot, so we just have to create those platforms where they can be able to do that. So yeah, I think that's it. As we move forward from now. Yeah.
Thank you very much. For me, I look at it in a we look at it in a two different way, because I also work with women younger than me, my age and older. But in Sierra Leone, we 2 years now we set up a program which is leadership program for young people between the age of 12 and 18. That, yeah, this is a safe space we created for them, because of these traditional and cultural boundaries, discussing about issues like this. In the countries where we from, I'm from Sierra Leone, there's some community where it is not healthy for your program. You might think it's all right. I'm passing on information. But for your program to survive and thrive within these communities, there are boundaries you have to respect and set. So that was where we were coming from. That's why we set up this leadership program for young people, so that when we pass on certain information, or when we create certain spaces, then we're able to allocate them accordingly, so that we don't go against traditionals and bylaws, because most of these communities we work in, they have their own laws within those communities, and you have to familiarize yourself with it to be able to work with the people, and for the people to be able to work with you. So that's where we're coming from. So for we in London, when we organize these safe spaces, I run a shop, by the way. And the idea behind the shop, owned the shop since 2015. The idea behind the shop, remember I told you guys that I come from Peckham, and Peckham is like Africa. So we have different communities. And again, there are boundaries between these communities. I am from the Salian community. I have access to every part of the Salian community and our people. But I want to be able to engage Somalian community, Nigerian community, the Gambian community, the Kenyan community. So we recruit women within these communities who have already attended our workshop, and they believe in our cause, and they want to be part of our movement to work with us. They give us access into these communities. Like, for instance, I will give you an example with the Somalian community. Up to date, we're not able to have men and women in discussion in one room, no matter what we're talking about when we're addressing SRHR issues. That's just to show you, and this is in the UK, it's Western world. So it just tell you that as Africans, we travel with our tradition and our cultural beliefs. So what we do within these spaces, in my shop, you can come as if you're coming to buy food. You can come to my shop and buy food to cook any kind of African dish. That's one thing. And then within my shop, how do we distribute information? We put condoms around, we put information about FGM and spaces, and information about services. So when you come, you could be doing your shopping and you say condom, and What are you doing? Do you sell condom? That's where the conversation starts for women or young people that don't know what we do. Then we engage them. So there are sometimes people who come to shop. Our shop is closed because we're inside giving support, one-to-one support. There are some women who are not comfortable with group setting discussion. We give them appointment where we give them one-to-one support. There are some of them who are comfortable with smaller group, 2 or 3 discussion. They are happy. So this is how we do it. And for 3 years now, we've been getting support from an institute. There's a doctor called what's her name? I forgot her name now. Dr. Jane Kavana. Dr. Jane Kavana is one of the doctors that is working on FGM, and I've been working with her since 2013. So through her clinic, she's giving our service box of condoms for our service in London and also for we to take back home in Sierra Leone, and also lubricant gel for women when we talk about pleasure. And sometimes we use this because, like I said, for women like us who have been through FGM, most of the time we're dry. Our vagina is very dry. So we encourage women to use, something that would, put you in the mood, that would help you, because sometimes we're down into having sex, but our vagina is very dry, but your mind is telling you I want it. But if it's very dry, you end up having pain and bruises. But that gel will help you to kind of work your way into it and arrive at a sex and pleasurable sex affair. So I'm just gonna stop there because I know time, and let we allow this young lady to share with us. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So, since you talked about lubricant, I also actually recently created a pleasure brand that makes vibrators and lubricant with the. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay. Louder? Sorry, sorry, sorry. Yes, sorry. I forget that we're talking to everybody. They're so engaging. I'm just like so drawn to you.
I know.
Sorry, sorry. Um, Sorry, I was saying that one of the things, while my work was largely a knowledge sharing platform until this year, so for 6 years it's been only information, but I wanted to, and I finally also had the support and funding to offer my community products as well. And my the first products we wanted to offer at Leezoos, the brand is called Leezoos in case anyone wants to check it out, are very discreet but very effective vibrators and lubricant, and the packaging is joyful and fun, and the products are extremely effective. But we also have to be mindful of India's obscenity laws, which are colonial era laws that are still in effect, where if something is obscene, it could be illegal. And what is obscene is so subjective. So whether it's a customs official or some, misogynist, just sort of being a citizen vigilante type who wants to file a case, and anyone can make trouble for you if they think what you're doing is obscene. So with that in mind, we want to remain very pleasure positive and very sort of accurate in what we're doing, in communicating how these products are to be used. And yet, we have to sort of be mindful of the fact that, it can't look too phallic, or it can't sort of be explicit in the language used. And in fact, I think this is an interesting challenge that anyone using the internet also has to sort of navigate, where the policies online in many ways are reminiscent of these colonial era laws, where if you use anatomically accurate words to describe body parts in your campaigning around something to do with sexual health, whether let's say it's something as innocuous as breast cancer awareness and like self breast exams, or whether it's something more out there by Facebook's standards, like orgasms, right? Which we should be allowed to talk about, but unfortunately, there are these mechanisms in place that make it difficult both to educate as well as to market products that solve for solutions in these spaces. But anyway, what's been really exciting is that whether in person or online, I think the word of mouth sort of network around pleasure, particularly for women, is so strong. If my vibrator gave you your first orgasm, you are going to tell 10 friends tomorrow, and that's what happened. And so, like, we sold out of our first toy within a week of launch, even though we didn't advertise. We couldn't advertise. And so I think it, again, that pleasure is just such a profound and powerful force. And if it's the difference between never having had an orgasm for your maybe 30 or 40 years of life to having your first one, that is an awakening that creates an activist. It's like that you become an advocate for pleasure after that experience, and that's what's happening to the women who follow me and who buy my products, where I'm getting these messages that make my heart dance, and having these little sort of pockets of pleasure advocacy happening in households and friendship groups and communities. And it sounds like your shop creates moments like that as well, right? And I think that it's so powerful that there's such similarities across the world. Like I'm getting goosebumps just listening to the work of people in all these miles away from me. We're saying the same thing. So yeah, I mean, I hope there's everyone's going to become a little pleasure. Wave the pleasure flag wherever you can, in your house, in your school, in your office, wherever. Yeah. Anyone else? Are we?
Or probably you want to share?
Thank you so much. I think my voice is better than yeah.
Well, it's
Oh, oh yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Ninette from here, Rwanda. Work with Anastase in Haguruka. I am executive director. We enjoyed partnering with Amplify Change to use this positive approach because, as Anastase saying that in Rwanda, basing on our culture, is so difficult for young adolescents to to have accurate information, either at family level, in school as well. So I remember when we had aggressively training to teachers, awareness through clubs at the school. Through our toll free line, we received more than 20 cases per hour where students ask for more information in details, and that was an indicator that this is really needful. Our young adolescent in Rwanda wants someone neutral to share accurate information. Otherwise, probably is why the teen pregnancies is still increasing in Rwanda. They have wrong information. So I would like, by the way, to thank Amplification team to get to know these approaches. It's really interesting to us, and it was hard. I remember at the beginning when we went to introduce this project in faith-based school. It was so hard for us to convince the directors of school what we are bringing in their school. But now they are calling us, when are you planning to come back? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. My name is Joshua Tinomjoni. Um, my name is Joshua Tinomjoni, and I'm from Uganda. I represent an organization called Joint Mechanism for Access to SRHR. It's a youth-led organization I founded with colleagues from Uganda, and it's championing young people's SRHR. My concern, it could be concern, it's not a question, it's just a concern. It's not that much different from my sister. In Uganda, the adolescents, there is a big gap, and which is underlooked by the government and the policymakers. So what we are trying to do, we are trying to reach out schools. So now this is the gap. The government is giving less ears to the young people or the youth advocates, and also the policymakers are giving it a deaf ear to listen to what we are being faced. And now this is why teenage pregnancies, she has also mentioned about it, is rising in Uganda. You find like we are now in 26% teenage mothers, young girls pregnant, and actually rose to 28 when we were still in COVID. So you can see that's a huge number of teenagers getting pregnant. So my call is that we should focus more on young people's SRHR, uh, trying to give them support energy so that they can move on and take on this mantle. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Anik. I'm also working with Anastase in Haguruka. We all know that parents are not comfortable to discuss with their children about sex. I would like you to share or to give us mechanism how to get them feel comfortable to discuss with their children, because it is a challenge, it is a barrier that we have. Thank you.
I think I'll come in there as a mother. Remember, I shared with you that my oldest daughter is 20 years old. So I I don't only talk about I when I start the conversation to talk about sex with my children. I think they were a lot younger, but I come from the point where I want them to understand about FGM. And the first thing I did, we did a in 2014. There was a documentary that I'm part of, which is that documentary is by Leila Hussein, and I am there in that documentary. I'm the woman with the red hair. Yeah, so I shared my story, and that was the first time my husband and my children get to hear about my experience of FGM. We watched the documentary together, and I remember my son was so upset. My son was very, very upset that something like that could happen to me. And my daughter, who is now 20 years at that time, she said to me, Mommy, show me that woman that sat on you so that I can go and sit on that woman as well. Because as children, they couldn't understand that, when they get to hear. And for me, the best way to tell them is for them to hear my story along with other women from all over Africa, so they can know the extent of what is happening and how I can protect them. I have 5 girls and 1 boy. So from then, there were questions that lead to sex and pleasure, which come from my older daughter and my son. And so from that point, I wasn't afraid and I wasn't ashamed to discuss with them about that. I never had that opportunity. And because I was this exposed, because I was living in the UK, I was privileged enough to go to school, go to university, and learn. So I'm able to pass on this to my children. So for me, I think my best advice is to sit them down and talk to them. If they're girls or boys, talk to them about their body. Don't break down those barriers about certain things, although there will still be boundaries, but you have to knock down those walls so that your children are comfortable talking to you about anything, instead of they find someone safer out there to talk to instead of you, because things will happen to them. You will be the last to know. So my children, they know about this thing, and we talk about sex all the time. My daughter, 20, she said to me, sometimes when she said, "Oh, mommy, my belly is hurting," because she have terrible period pains. And I said, "Oh, did you have sex?" She said, "I'm not ready for that yet, mommy. I'm not ready." So we can talk about that with my 6-year-old in the room, my 10-year-old in the room, my husband in the room, and all of us will just laugh. So my household is like that. Like I said, my husband and I can talk about sex and pleasure anytime, because we think it's very important information that we have to, and knowledge that we have to pass on. So not only the younger generation, even the older generation, because there's some older people that the younger people know more than, look at these youngsters educating us. So I know we have to catch them young, but let's not forget about the older women and men as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. One thing that I've always been mentioning recently to my friend is my mom is my very, very good friend, but I never get an opportunity to discuss about my sex and relationship to my mother. And I'm always like, I really wish I could have shared about this breakup, but I can't because it's just not possible in our context. But one thing that I've recently learned is, you know, previously when sexual health interventions or, these kinds of health intervention were coming in our communities, they used to disrupt what was already existing in our communities. So, for instance, when you go to the southern coast of Tanzania, it's very famous practice called Jando and Unyago, where parents sit with the youngers and they teach them about life, sexual health, da da da. But possibly the information that was being shared in those platforms was not a correct information. And when sexual health interventions came, they said, we are disrupting this practice. You know, we don't want Yando and Unyago to happen again because they are perpetuating teenage pregnancy, HIV, etc. And those forums were being erased out. So they are not existing at all. But last year we did community dialogues involving parents and religious readers and da da da. And that was a complaint saying, you're coming now to teach us about sexual health, but in the previous you used to disrupt what was actually happening. So I think we may need maybe to revise our approach when we are going back to the communities, building from what is already existing without disrupting. Sometimes we say we are disruptors, we are disruptors. I don't know what we are exactly disrupting, but we got an opportunity to actually build on what is already existing. So for instance, within Giando and Unyago Forum, that was a platform where parents were more free to speak with their kids. Uh, they were sharing an information which was not correct. But if we went there and partnered with them, that was an opportunity to start sharing what is actually right to be shared, and possibly could have created a massive change, big change that we, instead of going saying we are disrupting, this is not working, So I think this is the thing that we are doing now. We are about to start one of the work in Central Tanzania, a place called Tabora, and they are very famous practice called something in Chagulaga, where boys are beating the drums and girls have to run, and then boys have to start running after the girl, and then when you are catched up by the boy, that's going to be your husband, which is a very crazy habit. I've heard about it. Yeah, I would run slow if they want me.
You run for your life.
Yeah, I would run slow. So, yeah, so if they force me, you have to catch this girl.
Small steps.
I'll be like, yeah, I
Baby
have something
steps.
in my So, so when we wanted to go and start our program there, so everyone was like, yeah, we need to work with the police to arrest people who are organizing these community Chagulaga events. We need to do that. But I was like, you know what? Let's keep these forums, but let's go and put what's right and what's, let's go and disrupt the information that is being provided there and the practice, but without totally erasing it. Because now, when you want to do community events, when you want to do community dialogues or community forums, it's so hard to bring the people together. You need money, you need to provide food, you need to provide per diems and transport and everything. Nobody cares. And if they don't have forums to talk to each other, they never talk to each other. Everyone is busy. They woke up going to the farms, they were going to find money. But if we start building on these existing forums, I think there are opportunities um, um, to add what is actually right information. I think one of the practice that I love talking about is the practice of one of the partners called Educate in Tanzania. So we went to rural areas in Mtwara. They invited us to go and see what they're actually doing. They work with those trainers within the Jando and Unyago. Those were the women who were being arrested before, saying they are sharing immoral practice within, so we have to disrupt that practice. But what the Educate did, they trained those Ngaribas, those old women who are highly respected within that community. Instead of arresting them, they trained them on menstrual hygiene practice. And then they let the Ngariba speak to the youngers, speak to the women. And it's working because they trust them. You would imagine when the Ngariba walks in, all the girls are like hands up. They want to ask question, ask question, and ask question because they trust those Ngaribas compared to when if it's Innocent, Dr. Innocent Grant from Dar es Salaam is here to teach about menstrual hygiene. They're not comfortable, they don't trust me. So I think one of the practice that we can actually do is finding ways to build on those existing community structures without totally disrupting them, because as we move, we actually find that it's very difficult to bring the people together, to enhance those intergenerational dialogues and parents to children dialogues. But since we know what's actually right information, we could start building on this right information within these these forums. Sometimes they really appreciate when you go without disrupting what they're actually doing. They appreciate they build trust. When they build trust, start injecting the doors slowly, slowly. They get what's actually right to do and what's not actually right to do. So I think, yeah, with engaging the parents, to see that way is one of the opportunities, because I saw that as a complaint last year, that you came first, you said it's not right. Now you are coming, you're saying we should do this. We don't understand you. So I think we should do that.
Thank you so much. I think I want to answer this basing on one of the recommendations we were given during the roundtable discussions we had parents represented. Remember, we had a roundtable discussion that brought together faith-based leaders, school heads, teachers, and parents, including children. And one of the things they say they want to see really happening is more conversations about this pressure, because they don't know. They want to know and have more information so that they can be able to facilitate their fellow parents or teach their children. Again, we need sort of men engaged. In patriarchal society or male dominated society, male parents tend to have power over every decision at home. If we get male parents really understand why this is very important, I think all parents can feel comfortable talking about a pressure positive approach to preventing any risky behavior or incidents that happens as a result of lack of accurate information. Again, I want to say that this is also something personal. We should, as parents, I'm not a parent, but I'm parent to be, we should really be eager enough to change, because some of the parents might resist to change, even not ready to listen to what is happening, because they sort of hear something like a sex, and that immediately makes them stop even continuing to learn about that topic. And another thing that we noticed during the roundtable discussion, the parents are really uh, eagerly waiting to see more conversations happening, and they want to understand why they should feel comfortable talking about sex with their children, because it's traditionally something that is taboo. And lastly, I feel like we need more pleasure champions in the community who will be moving around in the community, talking about this and try to make awareness and mobilization within the community so that everyone gets to know and understand why it is important to feel comfortable discussing sex with their children. Thank you.
Are we good with time? I want to just be mindful of it. Yeah? I think, yeah, I'm on because so much of what I've experienced echoes so much of what's been said, and I want to be mindful of people's time. I think that um, dismantling shame is so central to being able to do pleasure positive work. And even as, I mean, all of us, I'm sure, still have some shame. Like, dismantling shame is a lifelong process because we are fed so much shame from literally infancy. And I think that one of the most powerful ways to get a community to feel comfortable and to share and to ask for what they really need is if you have dismantled your, like, there's no shame in this room coming from you. Suddenly that is an invitation, such a powerful invitation. Whereas if there is shame coming from you, and unfortunately so often there is, and it's not even the fault necessarily of the presenter, it's the fault of the society and the world. But I think it's such an incredibly powerful invitation to speak about sex as if it's something you participate in without shame. It's something you enjoy without shame, and it's something you are not going to judge them for. You know, and I think it seems it's so simple. It is so simple. It's free in a way, right? To dismantle, to be this way. And yet it's something that so few official interventions are able to do. Too often the practitioners are speaking as if sex is something only other people do. You know, I don't even know what this thing is. I don't do it. I'm just telling you how to use condoms, or, you know, like, I think there's a dissociation that's very difficult for someone to feel safe and to relate to when bringing their own solution, if that's the approach. And I think when you're doing the work on the internet, also there's a lot of trolls, and there's going to be lots of people who try and stop you. or who slut shame you, or take offense from a religious perspective, or whatever it is, because you're suddenly reaching a much wider group. Whereas in, smaller spaces in real life, it can feel a bit safer and sort of intimate in a wonderful way. I really love doing things in person, and I think when I do things online, you kind of have to protect yourself a little, because it's hard to control how you're perceived, and people will come at you. And so I think looking after yourself when you do this work is also really important, because it can be difficult work and it can take a toll on you, both the resistance as well as the sharing of trauma and all kind. It's intense work. So I feel like we must also remember to look after ourselves while we do this pleasure-based work.
Great. I just want to thank the panel so much for talking about their experiences and how they became a pleasure implementer, their really wonderful journeys, and some amazing sort of reflections and tips on how anyone really who wants to become pleasure implementer can implement pleasure, whether that's through their official work, through their organizational work, or just as an individual, making, doing what you want in your life. So I just want to thank everyone one more time. Thank you all so much, and thanks to the audience for joining. And just to point to a new resource that has been released in partnership with the Pleasure Project, if I can pass this to you to hold up. We working with 8 civil society organizations, including Haguruka and Young and Alive Initiative. We've been able to collaborate with them to come up with 10 sort of top best practice tips on how, as an organization, you can start to think about implementing pleasure in your own work on sexual and reproductive health and rights, or actually more broadly as well. So please go to either the Pleasure Project website or the Amplify Change website and check it out. It is available now, and we really hope that everyone enjoys it. So thank you all so much for coming. Thank you.